So I want to say thank you for all coming near and far. The Siyum is in memory of my grandfather Albert Goltz, Uli Nishmat Eliakim ben Aharon, my grandfather on my mother's side, whereas my brother and I have actually knew him as Zeta Albert. I'm going to talk a little bit about Zeta Albert, his memory, what he means and has meant to me in my life. Talk a little bit about his story, and then conclude with the final few lines of the Gemara, the tractate of Brachos. Zeta Albert grew up in Poland, pastime Poland, now with the borders, it's Belarus, in a town called Oshmany in the 1930s. And growing up in Poland in that time was not an auspicious place or time to be a Jew. And thankfully he was able to survive the Holocaust alongside his mother and sisters. And I don't want to speak too much about his story, just want to give you a quick summary of what happened. I would encourage you to share with you the details of his story online, a few of his testimonials that he gave. And I don't want to speak too much about it because on one point, it doesn't define who he was as a person. And secondly, it's something that's so beyond us to relate to. More on that in a bit. So first, he was rounded up in a ghetto in his hometown Oshmany, and then from there, he was sent to Miligane to build a road, then to another camp. I shouldn't be laughing at the name, but I find it funny, called Unishkish. Then for a week, he was in Ponizevich. I don't know if it's the same town where the yeshiva was, it could be, I don't know. Then he went to a ghetto called Sharlai. And then from there, he was sent to Shtutov for 3 months. And he said the 3 months felt more like 6 months. And when he was there, it became overcrowded and to the point where he was going to be sent to Auschwitz. But even the transport somehow to Auschwitz was overcrowded, and they needed to send 27 people to another camp. His number was 26. So instead, he went to another camp called Nugame. And I don't know exactly, Mom, what the details were of this, but there's another camp called Aleph. I don't know if it's like a sub-camp or whatever. So he was back and forth. Same issue in Nugame as in Shtutov, overcrowdedness. But fortunately, the British were fighting quite strongly, and his train that was going to take him to Bergen-Belsen instead took him to a prisoner of war camp called Stalag XP, also known as Stambostel in Western Germany, where he said the conditions were the worst out of any place he had been. And the timing is quite fascinating. 78 years ago yesterday, April 29th, 1945, he was liberated by the British Army. Also, Shira Khan's birthday. Happy birthday, Shira. Two different good things that happened on that date, very far apart. So from there, he was reacquainted with his sisters and his mother. In 1947, he made his way to America. First New York, then Cleveland, and finally in Pittsburgh. I've got to say, Mom, it's a good thing it was Pittsburgh. I can't imagine how depressing life would be not only living in Ohio or Cleveland, ouch, but imagine all the sports misery we would have gone through. The Pirates, who are the worst team in baseball throughout the last 20 years, you even got to see them win two World Series. And Cleveland only has one measly NBA championship. From there, he was in Pittsburgh for about 10 years. In 1957, he went to Israel briefly to meet his wife and get married. Came back to Pittsburgh. And I wanted to speak about this part because I think this part of the story is much more important. Zeta Albert didn't have a normal education. He didn't know English, and he had to learn the language. He had to become acclimated to the culture of America in the 1940s and 50s. And I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for him. More on that in a bit. So eventually he was able to get settled in Pittsburgh and raise his family. He was working for the most part of his life at the Giant Eagle in Squirrel Hill, the grocery store there, working in the produce section, and as a cashier. And Mom, I remember this was after he had passed away. I was in Pittsburgh for grad school, and the Milches and other families who have been in Pittsburgh for a long time spoke so warmly of Zeta Albert that they knew him for when he was there, how he always had a kind disposition, he always had a smile on his face, and he was always really efficient at the cashier's desk. And Mom, if people want to ask my mother afterwards, ask my mom about the story where he caught some people stealing from the store. It's a funny one. I won't share it here because I'm being recorded. So that was 2019 when I was in graduate school. Rewinding back to 2011, Zeta Albert's well retired, and his health is catching up to him. And comes to the point where we don't exactly know how much time left he has, but we know that it's coming short. And my parents, alongside Zeta Albert, made a really hard choice. Ultimately, I believe the right one. That it would be better for him to spend his final few months with us in Maryland than alone or assisted living in Pittsburgh. So it was really important for me, and for my brother especially, because we would only see Zeta Albert maybe once a year. We'd go up around August time, watch the Pirates. For my mom, it was especially important because my grandmother, I probably would have called her my bubby. She passed away before I was born, is buried in Pittsburgh. And so I got to spend a lot of really good time with him. And there are two memories, positive ones I'd like to share. The first one is shortly after he moved in with us, it was Hanukkah time. And Dad, I don't think I ever lit Hanukkah candles with Grandma and Grandpa, so I don't think I need to elaborate on the symbolism of lighting Hanukkah candles with your grandfather who was a Holocaust survivor. The happier memory, Mom, I think this was your mother's recipe. The Purim rolls. I don't know if you call them the Purim rolls, but I know a lot of people here probably make hamantash. I will tell you that as good as they might be, my mom's are better than yours. Not a question in the world. You come over to my mom's house, she'll make them for you, be like, wow, my hamantash are lacking. You really have to go have Miriam Cohen's hamantash. And so I remember very distinctly, and I'm sure you remember this too, that it may not even have been Purim, it could have been whatever. You can make hamantash or whatever. It's a yummy snack. And so instead of rolling it into a circle, forming it into a hamantash shape, roll it out into the same dough, into a rectangle, put the same filling, the chocolate, or the poppy seeds or the fruit, whatever, you roll it up into a roll, put it in the oven, bake it, and boom, you've got a Purim roll. I don't know if you had a special name for it, Mom, or whatever.
Well, I would make hamantash, but then when my hands got tired of shaping, I made it roll.
So, St. Albert wasn't a person who was overly complimentary when it came to food. You knew he liked something based on how much was left on the plate. And so, you knew he absolutely loved these rolls because there was not even the tiniest crumb left on his plate. And so to see that was something pretty cool, because I would have never had that experience otherwise. And putting those two experiences aside, I would say that just being able to spend quality time with him, having dinner with him, having a meal with him was really important for me and for my brother. And so his health began to deteriorate rapidly, and eventually, peacefully and painlessly, he passed away in his sleep on May 4th, the 12th of ER, which is your site will be, I believe, on this Wednesday. And in preparing for this Siyum, Mom, I was thinking about something that on the one hand, we could look at things from a sad, obviously a sad note, but especially a sad note that without going into our family tree here, there won't be any more Goltzes from Zeta Albert. My mom is a Goltz, obviously, but she's a Cohen now. My brother and I, our last name isn't Goltz, it's Cohen. I think anyone who knows me in the room knows that I'm very fond of my last name and what it means. But my passport says Cohen on it. My license also says Cohen on it. We had the NFL draft this weekend, and I'm not saying that I'm good enough to be an inside linebacker for the Steelers, but they didn't address that in the draft this year. I know I'm a little undersized, but I've got the speed. Maybe if they want to call me up, I can play for the Steelers. But the last name on my jersey isn't going to say Goals. It's going to say Cohen. Maybe Man U needs a striker. I could probably play striker for Man U. They're a bit stinky. But that aside, I would say while legally and practically that might be true, it cannot be how we view our family tree now and on. We have to re-examine not legally what it means to be a Goltz, but really what it actually means to be a Goltz. What does the name Goltz mean? And going back to him surviving the Holocaust, I say, while that was an important piece of his life, it wasn't a defining piece of his life. It didn't make him who he was. It was the things that came afterward. And on top of that, as important as it is to learn about the Holocaust, and we're in an era now where somehow Holocaust oil is increasing, and Zeta Albert would be one to say that there's no sort of secret message we should take away from the Holocaust. When you asked him in his testimonial, when you asked him what should Josh and I know, take away from his story, his message was just know the history. Just know what happened. Just have the information and be armed with it. Which is why I said earlier, I'm happy to share with you his testimonial articles afterwards. And so, let's try and understand Zeta Albert from a lens that we can appreciate and understand. I mentioned he came to America. He didn't know English. He came from Eastern Europe. He went to Cheder before the Holocaust happened. Now he's in America. He's in Pittsburgh. He's in a copper mill.
Steel mill.
I think he said he was working in both. Whatever the case might be, it's a totally different reality. And yet, what did he do? He had this tremendous challenge, and he said, I don't know, he said it, he mentally said it, whatever, that I have this challenge in front of me, and I know that I can overcome this challenge. I believe in myself and what I can do, and I can succeed in America. And that's what he did. And he became quite successful at it. As people in Pittsburgh, 7 years after he passed away, people still remembered who he was for his kind disposition at the Giant Eagle in Pittsburgh. And so I think, what does it mean to be a Goltz, to pull this all together? It means to be someone who has belief in oneself, confidence in oneself, without arrogance, and like the Milcher said, always with a smile on your face. And so, first, Mom, I know from what you've told me in your life, it goes without saying that you're a Goltz. From the stories you told me before I was born, delivering newspapers at the ungodly hours in the morning, to making the collegiate tennis team at Pitt, and to now seeing what you've been able to accomplish in your life personally and professionally now. Like I said, it goes without saying, but you've got the Goltz blood in you. And Dad, I know you come from a different family, but everyone who sees you work between the months of January and April knows that you've got the Goltz DNA in you also. And so now it's up to my brother and I to live the life of what it means to be a Goltz, to be a person who believes in themselves, their capabilities, and their abilities, that they can overcome the challenges that we see in our lives, whether it's on a daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly basis, with self-confidence, without arrogance, and with a smile on our face. My brother, thank God, he's a step ahead of me. He's a married man, although I don't know what to call his wife because he's having 2 weddings. He's got married in February and he's getting married again in June. So do I call his wife his wife, his girlfriend, his fiance, his wife? But he's a step ahead of me in that realm. Hopefully, I'm not too far behind at the right time, in the right place, the right person. But for not only for us, my brother and I, to be that person, but to be a leader of that type of person, but to also to pass that Goltz spirit on to the next generation, to keep that flame alive and strong and well. That is my mission. That is my brother's mission. And I don't think any of you come from Zeta Albert's family, but I would encourage you to try and take that on to the best of your abilities. I've got some pictures I forgot to pass these on earlier. I'll actually start with Rabbi Rosenbaum just because the first picture is a place where you might recognize.
That's my synagogue.
Yeah, that is your synagogue. That's where I had my bris. So feel free to pass the photos around. I want to go ahead and now conclude the Gemara of the Seth Brachos. So I failed to mention at the beginning whose house we're in. For those that don't know, we're in Chaim and Esti's house. So a big thank you to Chaim and Esti for hosting this. The Gemara in Brachos concludes by speaking about Torah scholars. Now, I'm of the opinion that there are 2 broad types of Torah scholars. There's the small number of people who dedicate every waking moment of their life to learning Torah. But this is someone that I don't think we know really that well. I don't think there's anyone in this room who dedicates every waking moment of their life to Torah learning. I think the other type of Torah scholar is someone that reflects the majority of people. It's the person who says, I recognize and realize that this is extremely important, but it's not something that's going to take up every single second of my life. I need to make a living, I need to support myself and my family. Sort of like Zayd Albert. And so I think the Gemara says, Amr Rabbi Elazar, Amr Chanina, that Torah scholars bring peace to the world. The Gemara continues to say, that not only do they bring peace to the world, but they're building the world. And I think of one person in particular who encapsulates this type of Torah scholar, who is not someone who's dedicating every single second of their life to learning, but rather they're earning a living, they're supporting themselves, their families, and making it important in every single second of their day that I know that at some point I need to learn. Whatever it is, whenever it is. And the person who I know best, who symbolizes this type of person, is a huge role model for me, and I'm sure for Aaron as well, is none other than Chaim Cohen. Chaim, for those of you who don't know, first we were fortunate to meet when I was in college doing Shabbatons at Penn State. We'd come every semester, and through a little push from Aaron Goldberg, who's our cameraman today, got me to get to know the Khans quite well. I feel very fortunate and blessed to know every one of you and to know your family so well. It's been extremely important in my Jewish journey since that first Shabbaton, I believe in 2017. And so I think of what does it mean to be this type of Torah scholar, because I think of you, because I think of the business that you run. You're building the world through that business. You're providing a living for, I don't know what your head count is. It has been, it's probably in the hundreds. You correct me if I'm wrong, but okay, fine, whatever. It's a big number since you started your company, and you're supporting a lot of people, whether it's through your business deals or supporting your staff, your employees. That business obviously, first and foremost, supports your family and your children and your grandchildren. You've got all of your crazy flights, Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago, Denver, God forbid if you have to go to Ohio, New York, New Jersey, wherever. I'm sorry, I had to put that one more in for you over time.
Thank you, appreciate it.
You're building the world through your business, but obviously there are a lot of people who aren't Torah scholars who run businesses. So where does the Torah piece come in? And it comes in by nature of what I mentioned earlier, that you find time somewhere on a plane, here, there, wherever. I know you, Bobby, you show me whatever it is that you're learning, you're finding something to learn in your day, whether it's with Aaron, with Sam Tarshish, whoever it is, you're finding time to learn. And so for me, you're a role model for how I want to live my life, and I'm so blessed to be able to know you and to know your family, and I'm very thankful. So the Gemara concludes by saying 4 different verses about peace and positive messages, I would say. It says, Shalom Rav la'aves arsecha v'elam amichshol. I'll just translate with the ArtScroll because it's easier that way. Abundant peace to those who love your Torah, and there will be no obstacles for them. Be shalom b'chelech shal bab amnosayich. Let there be peace within your walls, Jerusalem, serenity within your palaces. For the sake of my brothers and comrades, I'll pronounce peace upon you, Jerusalem. For the sake of the house of Hashem your God, I request good of you, Jerusalem. Hashem oz lamoitain, Hashem yivarich, et amova shalom. Hashem will give might to his nation. Hashem will bless his nation with peace. Drum Allah haroeh, slik Allah masechus brachos. Sorry, I'm going to say this a little slowly. Not so good at this. Only the second time doing this, so bear with me here. Adron Allah masechus brachos, adron Allah, daitan Allah masechus brachos, daitan Allah. Lo nisn sheimanach masechus brachos, lo sisn sheimanan, lo ba'oma hadin, lo ba'oma das eirtum ufanecha. Adonai Elohim v'le'osim sheteh torascha, v'mana uman yusein v'alom hazel v'teh imanu v'amaba. Chanina bar papa, Rami bar papa, Nachman bar papa, Chai bar papa, Abai Mari bar papa, Rafram bar papa, Rafish bar papa, Surcha bar papa, Ada bar papa, Daru bar papa. Rebna Adonai Elohim es create torascha b'finu v'pikios amcha beis Yisrael v'nachnu kumanu v'nachnu v'tze'etzinu v'tze'etzinu amcha beis Yisrael v'nachnu v'ishmecha v'nachnu torascha v'ishma. Oivai techachmeni mitzvosecha kilo olam lili, v'hi libi tamim v'chukecha l'man lo egosh, v'olam lo eshchach pikidecha kivam hi tani. Baruch atah Adonai l'avdim chukecha, amen, 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 sela va'ed. V'adim anach lefanecha Adonai Elohim v'yosinu shesamta chalkinim me'yoshvei b'is hamidrash lo, samta chalkinim me'yoshvei kronos. She'anu mashkim v'hem mashkim, anu mashkim v'divrei Torah, v'hem mashkim v'divrei b'teilim. Anu amelim v'hem amelim, anu amelim mekabel nischar, v'hem amelim inam mekabel nischar.
Ami Ratzim L'chai Olam Haba, V'hem Ratzim L'er Shachas. Shneimar B'ata Elohim to redeem the air Shachas, Anshi Davim Mirma, Lo Yechetzu Yemeim V'ami Efach Bach. Gertzom Lecha Adonai Elish Kishem Azartan and Siyum Maseches Brachos Ken Hazrin Latvil Masechut Usparim Achlerim Usaimon Limod Ulamed Lishmor V'Lasot L'Kem Eskol Yirei Talmud Tortecha B'Ava Uskos Kol Atamayim V'Amoraim V'Talmidei Chachamim Ya'amod Li L'Zar'i Shelo Tamush HaTorah Mipi Zar'i L'Zera Zar'i Adolam B'Titzkayim Bi V'His Halecha Tanche Osach B'Shachcha Tishmor Alecha V'Hakitzosa Hi Tesichecha Kibi Yirbu Yamecha V'Yosifu Lecha Shnos Chaim Orecha Yamim B'Mimna V'Smola Asher B'Kavod Adonai Oz L'Moiten Adonai Barech Tzemov Hashalom. You spell right? Yisrael Yisrael Shnei Rabba. Amen. Amad Yibra Yihu Asilu Yis Hadasa L'Achayaka Mesa Asaka Yaskun L'Chay Alma Mibne Karta Yerushalayim L'Shachlala Kichle Begava U'Lemekar Halchana Nuchra'a Min Ara V'La'asava Halchana Di Shmaya L'Asrei V'Yamlich Kucha Brichu B'Malchusei V'Karei L'Chaychonu V'Yamechonu L'Chayro Beis Yisrael Ba'agla V'Zman Karib V'B'Nra Amen. Shmei Rabbi Mevorach Olam L'Olmei Maya. Yisparach V'Yisparach Yisparach Yisramam V'Yisnasei Yisadav Yisalev Yisalal Shmei V'Kucha B'Chu. Elam Mikol Berchasa V'Shirasa Tushbechasa V'Chamasa V'Amiram V'Alma V'Nra Amen. Al Yisrael V'Rabbanan B'Al Talmidehun V'Al Kol Talmidei Samedehun V'Kol Mahan D'Askim V'Reisa V'Iva Asra Hadim V'Di V'Chol Asar V'Asar Yehir L'Chon Shlom Rabba V'Chil V'Chista V'Rachamim V'Chayin Arifin V'Mizonei V'Rivchei V'For Kamad Adam Abuhon D'Gishmaya V'Nra Amen. V'Shlom Rabba V'Shmaya V'Chayin Olim V'Kei Yisrael V'Nra Amen. V'Oseh Shalom Yirnav V'Yaseh Shalom Olim V'Kei Yisrael V'Nra Amen.
Sementan, Mazel Tov, Yeilanu, L'chol Yisrael. Sementan, Mazel Tov, Yeilanu, L'chol Yisrael.